What's going on, you guys? It's your boy Patrick, aka Addicted to Combat, back for another week of UFC action. And this week we've got a pretty fun fight night card in Las Vegas, free on ESPN Plus, although it is a title bout between Alexa Grasso and Valentina Shevchenko Part 2. Grasso defending her belt for the first time after taking it from Valentina earlier this year, and this card is a Mexican Independence Day themed card for the weekend. It's UFC, or Noche UFC, I should say, and it's a pretty fun fight night card. You know, not a lot of ranked talent outside of that championship bout. We also have a good co-main event between Kevin Holland and Jack Della Maddalena at welterweight, but there's just a lot of fun fights, you know, Mexican prospects, and some good spots for them to shine. And there's a lot of really huge favorites. So from a betting perspective so far, I only have 2 bets in, 2 money lines. I'm looking to add some props if I can find them. And I still have a little bit of tape study to do on this card. So I'm going to be pretty brief with my explanations and leans right now, because I'm getting this out late. I am limping to the finish line for these 17 consecutive weeks of UFC action that we have found ourselves on. We are almost there. This is week number 16. We have a fight card next week and then finally a week off, which I will use to catch up and be on top of things for the remainder of the year, because I've been falling a bit behind. But tomorrow night, Wednesday night at 8 p.m. Central Time, I will be having my live stream with my guy Effie from the Any Action Sportscast, good friend of the channel. We will be talking about betting action on this card. Hit the like, hit the subscribe, drop a comment down with your predictions and strong bets for this card so far, and let's get into it. The first fight on the prelims, we've got 2 debuting fighters off the Contender Series, and they were fighters that were not offered the contract on the show. Josephine Knutsson, although she won last month, she's a 6-0 Swedish fighter, kickboxer primarily. She did not have the most exciting fight, but I thought it was a pretty dominant victory. She was not awarded a contract. She takes on Mann, who was knocked out on the show last year by Bruna Brazil via head kick. So 2 women they're both coming off of wins now. Mann did go back to LFA and score a decision victory, although it was not a very impressive one. And on the Mann side, she is a 6-1 professional so far, and she's got a decent array of skills. Southpaw freestyle fighter, decent short-range weapons because she is pretty short in stature. She's 5 foot tall compared to the Knutsson side of things where she's 5'3". So 2, you know, not the biggest strawweights going, but Mann, she's got to be all the way in with her strikes, all the way in the clinch, or try to get the takedown, which would be wise here because at striking distance, she will be outmatched by Knutsson, who trains out of the MMA All-Stars gym in Sweden with, you know, talent like Khamzat Chimaev, Gustafsson. I don't even know who else is there these days. Alir Latifi, I doubt she's training with him, but she's a very good kickboxer. She's got K1 experience, like over 50 bouts in Muay Thai, and I think about 8 or 9 of them were stoppages, so she's got some finishing power for her weight class. Although in MMA so far, she's got a lot of decision wins, and she just bullies people in the clinch with that strong Muay Thai clinch, the double collar tie, digs knees to the body. At distance, she's pretty defensively sound, and she's got good cardio too. So her wrestling's coming along. You can tell that part of her game is developing. I don't see any way for Mann to win this fight, and you know, neither do the odds makers. They've got Knutsson on her debut here as a -700 favorite, -600 favorite on some books. Mann about a +500 underdog on BetOnline right now. So no way to really play this fight and gain any value from it. I mean, even if you looked at the inside the distance for Knutsson, which I would say is definitely possible in round 2 or round 3 by knockout, you know, it's just Knutsson still, even on the road to Contender Series, road to the UFC fight a couple of years ago, she was like a -1300 favorite in that fight against a Korean opponent. She dominated the fight, scored some nice head kicks, but she did not finish the fight. So, not something I would bank on, not something I would bet, but I do think Knutsson wins this fight in most worlds. So, moving on to the next fight at lightweight, we've got another debuting fighter in Charlie Campbell, a guy who got knocked out in the Contender Series last year via right cross from Chris Duncan, where they had a crazy back-and-forth 2-minute war. Campbell was destroying Chris Duncan in that fight, and then he rushed in for the kill a little bit recklessly and got knocked out cold. So he had to go back to the regional scene as well, go back to CFFC, score a knockout of his own. Another round-1 knockout for Charlie Campbell, pretty impressive one. a nice 2-3 counter against Josh Shrieker, and he got his ticket back to the UFC here. He takes on Alex Reyes, who has been on a 6-year-long layoff since his last fight in the UFC. This is Dominic Reyes' brother, and a guy who's got a pretty shiny 13-3 pro record. It's not relevant anymore because he's been out for health issues since 2017. So now 36 years old, making his return. This guy had a spinal infection due to, he got some sort of like E. coli infection from some stem cells that were performed on him. So just a wild story. You can read about it on MMA Junkie. They had an article about it from earlier this year. Reyes is going to fight Trevor Peek. He was going to fight Natan Levy on this card. Now we got the debut of Charlie Campbell, and a well-deserved debut. Campbell's been in Bellator. He's been on the Contender Series. Came very close to getting that contract. He's got power in his strikes, really good leg kicks, kind of like a measured technical brawler for Charlie Campbell, and he's got some grappling experience as well. If you want to dig into the record of Alex Reyes, you're going to see he's a very strong grappler, a black belt out of Robert Drysdale's academy in Las Vegas years ago. A decent striker as well, but he's not going to be the taller man here. That's going to be Charlie Campbell by about an inch or so. Not going to be the bigger, stronger man. That's going to be Charlie Campbell. Charlie Campbell's younger. And just to put it in perspective how much more active Campbell's been, Campbell is 7-2 as a pro. He's got a few amateur fights as well. He didn't even take an amateur fight in the time that Alex Reyes was in the UFC. So back in 2017, the career of Charlie Campbell had not even begun yet. That's how active Campbell has been compared to Reyes. So I don't see this going very well for Reyes. I think he gets knocked out within a round, to be honest with you. So his defense isn't that great. And unless he can catch Charlie Campbell, gassing himself out, jump on his back and submit him, I just don't see it going well for Reyes on his return. So this is one of the Mexican fighters and one of the Mexican-American fighters in Alex Reyes, where I think he will not be putting on a good performance in front of this Noche UFC crowd. So, yeah, give me Charlie Campbell. Again, like a minus 400 favorite. Seems about right, but I don't really want to pay that price on a debuting fighter, so I would take the minus 175 on Campbell by knockout. But we can move on to a pretty fun competitive fight between two wrestlers at the women's flyweight division. Tracy Cortez returning after a little over a year off. She takes on Jasudavicius. So we've got Mexican-American wrestler in Tracy Cortez. We've got the Canadian wrestler in Jasudavicius. And Tracy Cortez, a 10-1 professional record. She has always been very impressive. One of the better female fighter wrestlers in the league, honestly. And Jasudavicius, she's been underrated as well, and she's actually been sort of improving in these performances. She probably took a little bit of a hit as far as her reputation goes when she, skated by a victory over Kay Hansen. I think maybe even outstruck in that fight. Natalia Silva comes in as I think she made her debut that night as a solid underdog, and she soundly outstruck and stuffed all the takedowns, I think, of Jasmine in that fight, or at least was able to get back to her feet when she did. But, off back-to-back wins, Jasudavicius beat Gabriela Fernandez, a debuting kickboxer, and she beat Miranda Maverick last time as a solid underdog. So that was the fight that really showed, okay, she's got solid wrestling. She can stuff the takedowns of somebody like Maverick and, hold her own in the fight on the feet, too. So in this fight, though, I got to say, when you have two wrestlers, you have got to look at what happens if that cancels itself out and you just have them striking. Cortez, by the numbers, is the better striker. I think technically she's making advancements there better than Jasudavicius. And Jasudavicius just not as high output, not as aggressive in my opinion. Now, I don't think it matters. I think that what we're going to see here is a grappling battle. I think we're going to see Tracy Cortez shooting takedowns, bullying against the cage, ripping Jasudavicius to the mat, and using some solid BJJ to hold position there. So even if Jasudavicius gets Tracy Cortez down, Cortez is very physically strong and good at hitting reversals. So a lot of these women's divisions, you're going to see whoever lands on top usually sticks there for the majority of the round. But Tracy Cortez is strong enough where she's able to really shimmy her hips around it and switch positions on the mat. So, yeah, give me Cortez to win. This is a spot where I did pay the price at minus 115. I took her for 1 unit. on the money line. So not a huge bet here, but I am picking this one as one of the closer money lines to take a stand on here. So yeah, give me Cortez. I think it's by decision no matter who wins. There's not a lot of power in the strikes of either of these two women. We remain in the flyweight division here. At the men's side of things, we've got Edgar Chairez taking on Daniel Da Silva. This is Daniel Da Silva's 5th fight in the UFC. He has not gotten a win yet. He's been finished in all 4 of his performances. A couple times in round 1, a couple times in round 2. This guy has been proven to only have like 1 or 1.5 rounds of gas in the tank. He chases the finish early. He's super dangerous. All kinds of aggressive attacks, and man, he likes to bait people into wars, and he usually gets himself into a spot where he can't maintain the pace and gets finished in round 2. So I expect the same from Edgar Chairez here. I think Chairez can finish this fight. If it gets extended outside of round 1, Edgar Chairez is a pretty technical fighter. You know, his wrestling is decent, his submission game is decent, and his striking is pretty technical. He's not the highest output striker, though, and not the most aggressive guy. So is there a chance that we could see this fight extend outside of round 1? I think there's a decent chance of that. You know, it's up to Lacerda to really push the pace or not push the pace here. Chairez would be content to just strike one at a time and catch him coming in range. But I will say this, though. Edgar Chairez is a guy who's been so far successful in his round 1 efforts, right? Against Tatsuro Taira, which he lost by decision earlier this year in his debut. He knocked down Tatsuro Taira early, jumped on a guillotine, which he did not successfully complete, but it was pretty close. So not a bad effort there. Tatsuro Taira is super high level as a grappler, so to survive on the mat with this guy for as long as he did in round 2 and round 3, I think that's a pretty good mark on his record, to be honest. And even in the Contender Series, which he lost by decision as well to Clayton Carpenter, his best round was round 1. He was able to outland Clayton Carpenter, swell up his eye pretty well. This guy does not have bad experience either fighting in Fury FC and the UWC for Edgar Chairez. But, you know, his record's not the best, 10-5. It's just he's a finisher himself. You know, all of his wins are by finish. Even sometimes later in the fight, like in round 4, he's getting submission wins back in Fury FC against Yanni Vasquez. My only issue with Edgar Chairez is, yeah, the output I don't think is there, and a guy like Daniel Da Silva could overwhelm him with just output and volume in round 1. But yeah, I mean, it's a spot where, again, you're not seeing Edgar Chairez knocked out in his career so far, and you're only seeing him submitted on a couple of occasions, years ago. So I got to go with Chairez here. I just don't agree that he should be a minus, 250 favorite. It's just hard for me to get behind that number on a guy who hasn't scored a win yet, and a guy who I think is probably the less dangerous fighter early in the fight. So he's got to get out of round 1. I think he can do that and take over, probably win by TKO or submission within rounds 2 or rounds 3. So I think the trend continues. I don't have any faith that Daniel Da Silva changes his ways here. But if you do want to play Da Silva, Da Silva in round 1, that could be a prop to look at. If you find any better numbers for him, I mean, it's gonna be inside the distance if he wins, unless he's completely transformed himself and how his physiology works. I think he's an explosive, fast starter out of shoot to box. So, yeah, give me Chairez to win. Just no real angle or way to play this fight that I found so far. But we'll look at other sports books. Maybe there's like a nice round 2, round 3 prop for Chairez that can soften up that minus 235. But moving up to the middleweight division, this should be a pretty fun fight between Roman Kopylov and Josh Fremd. Now, yeah, I think Roman Kopylov wins this fight, and this is coming from me, and I'm a big Roman Kopylov hater. At least I have been in the past. I'd never really believed in this guy. He's a Russian combat sambo fighter with a lot of experience, and he, on paper, he had a lot of skills, but he came into the UFC and, losing to Karl Roberson, losing to Albert Duraev in one of the sloppiest fights I've seen, just did not leave a good taste in my mouth about Roman Kopylov. I had no belief in him against Di Chirico even. I had no belief in him against Punahele Soriano. And I didn't even have belief in him against Claudio Ribeiro. So right now I'm not doing too well picking Roman Kopylov fights, but I do think he wins this fight. Josh Fremd is a solid fighter on the mat, and he had some good performances, in a losing effort against Fluffy Hernandez. I thought pretty well of him there. And I even thought pretty well of him to defeat Cedricus Dumas and to do so by submission, which he did. So I cashed on him as a dog in that fight on that submission prop. But the guy did not look very good against Jamie Pickett. I'm so glad he won that fight because, I mean, I'm sure a lot of people would have lost their house if Jamie Pickett would have pulled that one off. But I know he missed weight for that fight as well, so that might have been part of what led to that bad performance. But as far as on the feet, striking-wise, Kopylov looks very good. I know Kopilov's gas tank was in question early on. That was my main concern for the guy. Lately, it's been looking fine because he's gotten all 3 stoppages, and they've all been in the later part of the fight, right? It's been round 3, knockout against Di Chirico. He got that round 2 stoppage over the 1.5 round mark against Punahele Soriano. And he just got that nice head kick knockout over Ribeiro after coming back and facing some adversity in round 1. So he's showing toughness. He's showing resolve. He's a very big for the weight class guy, similar to Josh Fremd. And he's training with Dagestanis, dude, shoring up that hole in the game, which was some of that defensive wrestling. So cardio's looking improved. Striking's looking improved. The wrestling looks improved. I would expect Roman Kopylov to be a decently sized favorite here, and he's gone all the way from like minus 275 all the way up to minus 400. So, again, just a spot where it's like, do I have to look for a way to play Kopylov? I've got to look for a way to play him inside the distance to soften up this number, because if that bad cardio rears its head again, Josh Fremd could take over on the mat more than that plus 310 would indicate. But looking at the recent performances, you got to go Roman Kopylov here, and I think he does win. Probably inside the distance. Call it Roman Kopylov round 3 TKO. Another women's fight up next at women's strawweight. This is a fight that I don't have much to say. Again, this should be a pretty quick one. I mean, I think it is Lupita Godinez defeating Elise Reed. I think she defeats Elise Reed all day. I'm not a big Elise Reed fan. Her striking has actually impressed me more than I thought it would, based on some of her performances. She's traded wins and losses in the UFC so far. But the spots that she's won have been super, super sketchy. Like the fight against Jinh Yu Frey, unanimous decision win, super close fight. The fight against Melissa Martinez, she won by decision. She was en route to losing that fight last year if it wasn't for one botched takedown attempt in round 3 from Melissa Martinez, where Elise Reed ended up on top and was able to end the round in dominant fashion. And then her fight with Corey McKenna, which, it should have been a unanimous decision win. It was a split, but she clearly won the fight against Corey McKenna, who only chose to wrestle at the last 60 seconds of each of the rounds, and then allowed herself to get outstruck at range. So a Taekwondo fighter in Elise Reed, limited skill set, no defensive grappling or get-up game to speak of, in my opinion. I think this is a spot where the grappler and Lupita Godinez can flip her down to the mat and hold control time there all day long, if she chooses to do so. Even if Lupita Godinez chooses to strike with Elise Reed, I think she could win this fight. That would be the path of most resistance, though. I want Lupita Godinez to take the path of least resistance, which I think she's learning her lesson. I think she will do that, and she will win this fight. So, Elise Reed, at least Elise Reed is super aggressive in some spots, too. She can march forward with these, big 1-2s, which are pretty powerful and have some sting on them, but she marches forward aggressively when she gets in her groove, and I think at that point, Lupita Godinez can reverse that momentum, flip her down to the mat, and hold position there, possibly even get a finish. But give me Lupita Godinez to win pretty confidently. Again, minus 450, the favorite, and we got to rely on her not going out there and showing off to the crowd, showing off her, she likes to box sometimes. I think that it is a little bit overblown, because there are spots like against Angela Hill where Angela Hill was making it pretty difficult in some of her movements to get the fight to the mat. But yeah, we gotta pick Lupita Godinez in this spot. I think she's got way more ways to win this fight, a clear grappling advantage. So give me Godinez by decision, a dominant one here. Again, not finding a lot of ways to play this. From a gambling perspective, but we can move on to a lightweight bout. A featherweight bout between Kyle Nelson and Fernando Padilla. Now, this is a spot where I think the upset could happen. We could find ourselves seeing Kyle Nelson, the Canadian grappler, get his hand raised in this spot. Fernando Padilla, pretty impressive young guy here, only 26 years old. Kyle Nelson, I think 32 at this point. If memory serves me right, let me pull him up. 14-5-1 draw for Kyle Nelson, the monster. He is 32 years old, 5'11", and he takes on Fernando Padilla, who is a pretty long, lanky Mexican fighter, 6'1", I want to say, at 145. Pretty impressive height and reach, but even with all that height and reach, Padilla is super aggressive, opportunistic submission fighter. Even off of his back, he's got an active guard that's dangerous, throws up submissions, grabs the guillotine, looks for the triangle. His knees and elbows and long punches are strong, but his defense leaves a lot to be desired, and I don't know. I mean, the guy's got like a near 100% finish rate, right? 5 knockouts, 8 submissions, and only 2 and 4 in his decision results. But, dude, I mean, if you watch that fight with any of his fights leading up to his UFC debut, and even the fight against Julian Erosa recently, early stoppage, but he was probably going to end up knocking out the chinniest man in Julian Erosa at some point. But, dude, he stands completely square to his opponents. He leaves his chin up in the air to be hit. I feel like Kyle Nelson, if we get the Kyle Nelson that just beat Blake Bilder and was able to counter-strike him effectively, knock him off balance with leg kicks, counter him with those big looping hooks that went right around Blake Bilder's guard and damaged him, rocked him at some points, I really do think we could see Kyle Nelson win this fight. And we're looking at the money line, which is Padilla minus 240 to minus 260, the favorite. Kyle Nelson plus 200 or so, the underdog. I'm going to take Kyle Nelson to win, and this is mostly because of just how many favorites are on this card that I like. There's got to be a couple of underdogs, and this is one of them that I think could come through. Kyle Nelson looks kind of like an improved version of himself. I know he faced some tough competition at lightweight before. He got knocked out by Carlos Diego de Fajeda. He got knocked out by the mythical creature that is round 3 Billy Q. I believe that was at featherweight, but still, nonetheless, he's looking like a better version of himself, holding strong positions in the clinch, which is where he's the strongest in this fight. I just think if we get that one that can play Matador against a guy like Padilla, a strong finisher, we could see Kyle Nelson use that experience, use that veteran savvy, kind of pace himself better than the super aggressive Padilla. So I'm going to take Kyle Nelson to win. Not something I feel super confident to put my money behind at this point. I think Padilla does have a good chance at winning this fight just with the output and the aggression, the optics here at Noche UFC. But, I mean, out of 11 fights, this is one of the few underdogs I could see really pulling it off. Like, you look at the board and you look at, okay, favorite should win, favorite should win, favorite should win. This is one where I'm like, favorite, I don't know. Kyle Nelson looks pretty good lately. I think Padilla going in there against the world's chinniest man alive in Julian Erosa, who's got terrible striking defense himself. I think Kyle Nelson could look a lot better than that and spring the upset here. So give me Kyle Nelson to win. I think he does so by another decision. Okay, moving along to the lightweight division. Now, this is kind of a similar matchup, honestly, to the one we just talked about. In terms of the just the dynamic of you've got a long, rangy striker, Mexican fighter, young guy in Daniel Zellhuber. He takes on Christos Giagos, who's more of the seasoned UFC veteran and the grappler in this matchup. But unlike Kyle Nelson, Christos Giagos has not had very much success in the UFC. He's gone 6-6, faced a lot of high-level guys, lost to those high-level guys, beaten all of the lower-level guys. But the thing with Christos Giagos that differentiates him from Kyle Nelson is his gas tank is just not very good. And after that, his striking he really can't fall back on. So I did call him to defeat Ricky Glenn. I'm actually higher on Christos Giagos' skill set than most, but it is against a certain level of opposition. And it's a guy in Ricky Glenn who I could see was kind of declining, and Christos Giagos was able to get that done in round 1. Catch him with that big left hook early, like 90 seconds in. But luckily for Christos Giagos, it was early in round 1 where he still had a gas tank and some finishing potential. Against Daniel Zellhuber, Zellhuber's the faster man. He's going to be the bigger man, have better striking weapons. Only 24 years old and 6'1" at the weight class. A massive 77-inch reach for Daniel Zellhuber, who, he had a very fun performance against Lucas Almeida, I believe, as an underdog. Won that fight, able to, keep his takedown defense strong against the cage. Distance striking up was super high. High striking output, shows good cardio. And against Trey Ogden, we saw basically none of that, right? We saw a very tentative, hesitant guy at the Apex a year ago in his debut. And Trey Ogden, a guy who was not able to get any of the takedowns he wanted to in that fight, but still able to do enough to win just based off of the striking output and the aggression that he showed against the guy in Zellhuber who just froze up. So if we can just throw that one out and just forget about that performance, which is, I know, hard to do, but against Lando Venata, we saw some of that finishing potential early on from Daniel Zellhuber. He almost got Venata out of there. Venata, I think more highly of Lando Venata than I do against Christos Giagos, honestly. So this one is a no-brainer for me. I think if we can escape round one, not let Giagos climb all over the back of Daniel Zellhuber, which I think is going to be a pretty easy thing to avoid, then I think Zellhuber can cruise to probably a round 2 or round 3 stoppage here using those striking weapons. We even see some opportunistic submission potential from Daniel Zellhuber on the regional scene. This guy has got two wins by submission, 7 wins by knockout. But if you go back to some of the mat work from him back in, I want to say it was Lux Fight League, you see some good you can see some good spots there where he's showing some know-how on the mat. Against Giagos, I don't think that's going to be totally in the picture here unless he completely gasses out and gets, club and subbed or something. But I could see a knockout happening on the Zellhuber side for sure, if not a dominant victory. So training out of Extreme Couture, I like his skill set, I like his potential. And I think this money line is actually kind of fair at minus 260. So yeah, give me Daniel Zellhuber to win. Might be looking at an inside the distance prop on this one. Up next, the bantamweight bout between the exciting to watch Raul Rosas Jr., 18 years old, youngest kid on the roster, Mexican-American. He takes on probably his easiest test to date in Terrence Mitchell. Now, Terrence Mitchell does have some experience over Raul Rosas Jr. as far as MMA is concerned, but the guy has fought out of very soft levels of competition back in Alaska FC. We saw Terrence Mitchell on The Ultimate Fighter years ago, got knocked out quickly by Kai Kara France, returned to the Alaskan regional scene where he's reigned superior above just super low-level bums, and he's used some pretty long striking weapons, a fast starting ability, and even switched to more of like a wrestling and submission game plan, did Terrence Mitchell, but he's not going to have success doing that here in the UFC. We even saw him take on another young prospect last time back in July. He took on Cameron Simon, who was able to take him down, reverse position on him, grounded pound him out in one round. So we already saw him take on a young South African fighter in the 22-year-old Cameron Simon and lose. I think this is a much tougher test than Raul Rosas Jr., who's just a physical freak as far as his wrestling strength, his BJJ know-how. It's all super slick, locks things in with the quickness. Obviously, Rosas Jr. did get placed on that high-profile card earlier this year at UFC 287. He took on Christian Rodriguez, who's a very experienced fighter in his own right. He chased the submission on Rodriguez, failed to get that, and he ended up losing the fight by decision and getting outpositioned and outworked in that fight. But that was just one of those spots where it seemed like, the undefeated young fighter at 18 years old, it was almost inevitable he needed to have that reality check. Believed his own hype a little bit too much and chased that early finish he was accustomed to. But in this fight against Terrence Mitchell, this is like his easiest fight to date. Obviously, they're trying to get this kid back on track, and I think he does so by a round 1 submission. Ways to play this fight, though, it's going to be tough. Again, we're looking at Raul Rosas Jr. minus 700, minus 800 favorite. Terrence Mitchell plus 550, the underdog, and that makes sense to me in a lot of ways. Raul Rosas Jr. to win inside the distance, I'm sure, is minus 300 to minus 400. To win by submission specifically, I would probably look for that one. That could soften it even more. But what are we looking at for the over-under 1.5? I wonder what that would be. Let me look this up real fast. So even the under 1.5 in this fight for Rosas Jr. and Terrence Mitchell, the under 1.5 is minus 275. So a little ridiculous there, but probably does hit. It's a big price to pay, but probably does hit. Raul Rosas Jr. in round 1 by submission is plus 100. So, that's the level of skill that they see in Raul Rosas Jr. and how poorly they see the skill of Terrence Mitchell, who's rarely ever been out of round 1 or round 2, even in the Alaskan regional scene. So, I cashed on the under 1.5 on Simon and Mitchell last time. I expect it to hit this time, but I probably won't be touching it. But yeah, Rosas Jr. inside the distance could be a parlay piece, and it'll probably cash, So yeah, give me Rosas Jr. within a couple of minutes to get the rear naked choke in this fight. Okay, co-main event up next at 170. Pretty exciting one between two very exciting fighters, Jack Della Maddalena, and we got Kevin Holland, a fan favorite as well. Now, probably the biggest test, well, it is the biggest test for Jack Della at this point, because Kevin Holland has got a lot of UFC experience. He's done well in middleweight, even in the title picture at middleweight after that long streak he had in 2020. He got out-wrestled and out-bullied from that division. Now at 170, he looks a lot more comfortable, and still, Kevin Holland is going to have a huge reach advantage in this fight, a big height advantage, and he's not that old. He's still only 30 years old, so still has time to make some improvements if he can, but BJJ black belt on the mat, not a very active wrestler, and defensively, that is his weak point, is that defensive wrestling. But against Jack Della Maddalena, Maddalena is a very well-rounded fighter as well. He's got a good ability to get off of his back if he gets taken down, good submission defense he showed, and his switch stance striking style is very technical. So kickboxing well out of either stance. His boxing with the hands is very crisp, clean, defensively responsible, and powerful. So yeah, I mean, and at 27 years old, still improving for the Australian prospect here. Now, he's probably taking a hit as far as his reputation goes after how close his last fight was against Basel Hafez back in July. That was a split decision that he squeaked out. I thought he deserved a win based off of the damage and the optics in that fight. He had much more gas left in the tank, and at striking distance, he was defeating Basel Hafez at every turn. But Basel Hafez out of Fury FC, I knew that would be a sweat in round one because of how strong and explosive he is, but I thought he would fade as the fight went on, and he did, but Jack Della showed a little bit of maybe fatigue or low fight IQ, pulling guillotines in a couple of spots and allowing Basel Hafez to end up in side control and dominate minutes of that fight at a time. Now, Jack Della, good submission defense, and a guy who I think is going to be the more technical striker out of the two here between Kevin Holland and Jack Della. It's just Kevin Holland has that equalizing power. Even the unorthodox back fists and punches off of his back, elbows up close, knees. I mean, this guy, everything he throws has got fight-ending power, even if it doesn't even look like it's going to have that kind of power. And that's shown by this guy having 13 knockouts out of his 25 wins. He has 8 submissions as well. We're seeing that front choke series is strong. The club and sub over Tim Means a couple of fights back. The opportunistic Darce choke against Michael Chiesa in his last fight. But again, much different test here. Jack Della is not going to be faced with a strong offensive wrestler in Kevin Holland. I think both guys are going to be content to use their length and long distance strikes and try to box each other at kickboxing range until maybe one guy gets into trouble, then maybe that guy panic wrestles. I don't know who that's going to be. So I got to edge Jack Della here. I think he's still got a lot more to prove to us. I think he's kind of at a buy low spot after not looking so great against the short notice debuting fighter in his last spot. But as far as the money line goes, this was closer to a pick'em. It's now minus 150 for Jack Della, plus 125 or so for Kevin Holland. I think the money line is right where it should be, so I'm not seeing any extra value on either side, in my opinion. So I'm going to pick Jack Della to win this fight. I think he does so. I think either man wins this fight by decision. Both guys pretty durable, pretty tough with good cardio. But yeah, give me Jack Della to do the better work. Get on the inside and use his clean boxing to win this fight. Okay, the main event, we have made it to fight number 11. Flyweight championship hanging in the balance between the first-time defending reigning champion Alexa Grasso as she takes on the woman that she took the belt from back in March, Valentina Shevchenko, in an immediate rematch here for the flyweight title. So a pretty fun fight. This first fight took place 6 months ago at UFC 285. Alexa Grasso comes through as a massive, plus 700 underdog and springs the upset in round 4 via submission. So, 7 title defenses for Valentina Shevchenko up until that point. And she had successfully defended against Taila Santos by split decision, a fight that many think that she lost, a back-and-forth fight there. And, then finally loses the belt to Grasso. So is the regression, are we seeing that on the side of the 34-year-old Valentina Shevchenko, now 35 years old actually? I'm not quite sure, but we can talk about the adjustments that each fighter made up until that point. we saw Alexa Grasso, who's primarily a really strong boxer in the division, starting to look really well in the grappling these days, too. We saw her capitalize on the spinning back fist mistake of Joanne Wood, take her back pretty quickly, put the hooks in, and get the round 1 submission by rear naked choke in that fight. She comes back another fight later against Viviane Araujo, shows very good cardio over 5 rounds, stuffs the takedowns there when she needs to, and boxes her up on the feet over 5 rounds. And then we see her go in there against Valentina Shevchenko, and just like the Joanne Wood fight, capitalize on a spinning missed back kick from Shevchenko in round 4, sink the hooks in, grab the back, and get that rear naked choke or face crank over the chin. So, upon just my recent memory, when I think about that fight, before I rewatched it a couple of times in preparation for this card, I thought of Valentina doing her thing in the striking, pretty much dominating the fight, and then missing a kick. And, with one stupid mistake, she lost the belt. That's kind of how it felt since she was a minus 1,100 favorite that night. But when you rewatch the fight, you can see Alexa Grasso was actually doing quite well in that fight. Every time that Grasso was in the southpaw stance, she was boxing up and landing big strikes in the face of Valentina Shevchenko there, who is, as usual, a stationary counter striker. Shevchenko, high-level Muay Thai, good kicks out of both stances, has a nice switch high kick, good strong punches, and she does have a judo base as well, and her wrestling looks okay offensively. But what you saw in that fight, in the first fight back in March, was, obviously they picked up on the fact that if you switch to southpaw for Alexa Grasso, then some of those kicks from that left side are not going to be able to land for Shevchenko the same way that she's used to them landing. So using that southpaw stance really threw off Shevchenko in that fight, and every time that she switched to southpaw, she was landing. She won round 1 due to some big striking moments. Valentina switched and was able to score some takedowns and control time in rounds 2 and rounds 3, and was winning the fight going into round 4. But she was slowing down, and you could see that every time Grasso got put on her back, she was shimmying around, not allowing Shevchenko to really land any damaging strikes. She was working her way back up to her feet pretty much at every turn and not allowing for her back to stay flat on the mat. So I like to see that from Grasso. Her cardio looks so strong in round 4 that I think that she had a good chance of winning round 4 and winning round 5 and pulling away 3-2, even if that went to the scorecard. So pretty strong striking output with the boxing. I think she can utilize that southpaw stance even more in this fight, switch stances to frustrate the former champion Shevchenko. I think her takedown defense will look leveled up, and I think we might even see some takedown offense from Alexa Grasso in this spot. Utilize that blossoming BJJ game, but if not, just land the more successful strikes at striking distance on the feet. I think her output will be pretty strong, and her belief in her cardio has got to be sky high at this point. She's looked really good in championship rounds in her last 2 performances. I think she does it again. I think she wins a decision here pretty strongly, 49-46, even 50-45 I could possibly see. So unless Shevchenko is wrestling pillar to post and doing a lot of damage in those positions, I don't see her winning this fight. And I think all of the momentum is in the favor of the underdog champion in this spot. So I took 2 units on Alexa Grasso at plus 140. You can get plus 143. I think the market will probably move back and forth as the week goes on. I think this line might stay right where it is. But whenever I see the reigning defending champion at plus money, that raises my eyebrows. Whenever I see the Mexican champion defending her belt at Noche UFC, that raises my eyebrows, and I think she's in a good spot to win on Saturday night. Okay, so that's all 11 fights for Noche UFC. Grasso versus Shevchenko 2 for the flyweight championship. Should be a fun fight card. Like I said, a lot of favorites on this card. There wasn't a lot to dig into or talk about. There's still some fights I want to rewatch before I talk to you guys on stream tomorrow night, Wednesday night at 8 p.m. Central Time with my guy Effie from the Any Action Sportscast. But again, a lot of chalky, heavy favorites in this card. Which ones will drop the ball? Like I pointed out, I think Kyle Nelson has a good chance of pulling off the upset, and the champion in Alexa Grasso is the other underdog I like. So we'll talk more tomorrow night about betting perspective stuff, some potential props we can look out for, and ways to make money on this card. But hit the like, hit the subscribe, and I'll talk to you guys next time. Cheers.